During the 18th and 19th century, ghost stories would begin to take hold, told around a firelight on a cold winter. Authors like Mary Shelley would forge creations such as Frankenstein's monster. Bram Stoker would use Elizabeth Bathory and Vlad Tepes as the foundations for Dracula. As the Victorians show, nothing captivates us like a ghost story. Perhaps it's the tantalising link to immortality. Perhaps it's the everlasting human requirement to explore the unknown. What lies after death? Can we communicate with people we have lost? Can ghosts get us pregnant? Don't lie. We all saw the lady marry the pirate ghost and claim that he got her pregnant. For me, ghosts are interesting. From an early age, I suffered, like most children, from phasmophobia, or a fear of ghosts. This, as I grew up, turned out to be just a symptom of thanatophobia, and this is because ghosts represent an image of death. For people with thanatophobia, they offer a tantalising glimmer of hope that after the lights flicker out, there may be something next. But at the same time, they are a gory reminder of what awaits us all. So naturally, I decided to do an entire video based around them. Specifically Roman ghosts. But before we get into the video, it's time to talk about our sponsor. And who is it? Me! As you all know, you can become a patron and support me on there and help me dedicate more time to creating funny internet history comedy videos for you guys. You get loads of lovely Discord benefits, you get sneak peeks for any videos coming up, and you get access to videos 48 hours earlier than anyone else. If none of that takes your fancy, you can help me by buying my merch. I have both a US and a UK store for you to shop at, and if you want my beautiful mustache rubbing all over you...
Wait, what?
I need to stop writing scripts at 2 AM while drinking wine. Don't forget, I also have a book which I'm currently writing the sequel for, and, you know, link in bio. Lastly, if you don't fancy any of that, share my videos and help get the message out there as much as you can, or at least tell everyone that I am fully willing to fight Jake Paul for views. You're right there. You know, if you're wondering why I do have a big skull, that's because I'm collaborating with Charles I. I actually reached out to Charles, a while ago, and he said he was really interested in collabing and doing a video with me, so we did one. We're doing one. Yep. To start off with, I think it's fitting to briefly talk about Pliny the Younger, whose work was a big help in this video. Pliny was a Roman author and administrator who published his own private letters in 9 books covering various events and giving us an insight into Roman life. These eerie stories are taken verbatim from Book 7, Letter 27, to Sura. The interesting thing here is, in a time of mysticism and ancient gods, Pliny himself questions what these spectres are, and he also questions whether they are on their own level of divinity or an extension of a terrified imagination. This first story is that of Curtius Rufus, and there's a chance I got that wrong. When he was in low circumstances, unknown to the world, he attended the newly made governor of Africa into that province. One afternoon, when he was walking into the public portico, he was extremely daunted with the figure of a woman which appeared to him of a size and beauty more than human. She told him she was the tutelar genius that presided over Africa and was come to inform him of the future events of his life, that he should go back to Rome where he should hold office and return to that province invested in a proconsular dignity, and there should die. Every circumstance of this prophecy was actually accomplished. It is said further that upon his arrival to Carthage, he was coming out of the ship, and the same figure accosted him upon the shore. In other segments of the letter, Pliny explains that this figure was disturbing because some of the predictions had already come true. Not exactly the scariest story, in all honesty, but if we want to get scarier, we're going to have to go to a little house in Athens. There was at Athens a large and spacious but ill-reputed and pestilential house. In the dead of night a noise resembling the clashing of iron was frequently heard, which, if you listened more attentively, sounded like the rattling of fetters. At first it seemed at a distance, but approached nearer by degrees. Immediately afterward a phantom appeared in the form of an old man, extremely meagre and squalid, with a long beard and bristling hair, rattling gyves on his feet and hands. The poor inhabitants consequently passed sleepless nights under the most dismal terrors imaginable. This, as it broke their rest, threw them into distempers, which, as their horrors of mind increased, proved in the end fatal to their lives. For even in the daytime through the spectre did not disappear, yet the remembrance of it made such a strong impression upon their imaginations that it still seemed before their eyes, and their terror remained when the cause of it was gone. By this means the house was at last deserted, as being judged by everybody to be absolutely uninhabitable, so that it was now entirely abandoned to the ghost. However, in the hopes that some tenant might be found who was ignorant of this great calamity which attended it, it happened that Athenodorus, the philosopher, came to Athens at this time, and reading the bill ascertained the price. The extraordinary cheapness raised his suspicion. Nevertheless, when he heard the whole story, he was far from being discouraged, that he was more strongly inclined to hire it, and in short actually did so. At least we know where the idiot who goes to investigate trope comes from in every horror movie ever. When it grows towards evening, he ordered for a couch to be prepared for him in the forepart of the house. After calling for a light, together with his pen and tablets, he directed all of his people to retire within. But that his mind might not, for want of employment, be open to vain terrors of imaginary noises and apparitions, he applied himself to writing with all his faculties. The first part of the night passed with usual silence. Then began the clanking of iron fetters. However, he neither lifted up his eyes nor laid down his pen, but closed his ears by concentrating his attention. The noise increased and advanced nearer until it seemed at the door, and at last in the chamber. He looked round and saw the apparition exactly as it had been described to him. It stood before him, beckoning with the finger.
Devil's finger!
Athenodorus made a sign that it should wait a little while, and bent again to his writing. Literally, this guy's being stalked by a ghost, and he just put up his hand and told it to wait. This guy makes Ross Kemp look like a newborn infant. But the ghost rattling its chains as he wrote, he looked round and saw it beckoning as before. Upon this, he immediately took up his lamp and followed it. The ghost slowly stalked along, as if encumbered with its chains, and having turned into the courtyard of the house, suddenly vanished. Athenodorus, being thus deserted, marked the spot with a handful of grass and leaves. The next day he went to the magistrates and advised them to order that spot be dug up. They found bones, commingled and intertwined with chains, for the body had been mouldered away, long lying in the ground, leaving them bare and corroded by the fetters. The bones were collected and buried at the public expense, and after the ghost was thus duty laid, the house was haunted no more. This does beg the question, what if ghosts are just misunderstood and all that crazy door slamming and chair throwing is just getting our attention? What if ghosts are just Kardashians? This next story comes from a freedman. A freedman was someone who was once a slave but was freed. I suppose that's kind of self-explanatory. But they still didn't quite have the same rights as a Roman citizen. For the record, his name was Marcus, the Marky Mark of his day. One night, his youngest brother was sleeping in the same bed with him. Okay, we're starting off with some time travellers from Alabama. He saw, as he thought, somebody sitting on the couch, who put a pair of shears on his head and actually cut off the hair from the very crown of it. When morning came, they found the boy's crown was shorn and the hair lay scattered about the floor. Pliny goes on to speak about the slave boy he owns, how lovely, which is similar to the previous story. A slave boy of mine was sleeping amongst several others in their quarters when 2 persons clad in white came in. Through the windows, cut off his hair as he lay, and withdrew the same way they entered. Daylight revealed that this boy too had been shorn, and his hair likewise was spread about the room. Spooky or fake? Up to you, honestly. Now let's move on to some Roman ghosts in more recent times. I won't lie to you, unlike Pliny's stories, which were discussions on the supernatural from an intelligent man, these are much less verifiable and come from various sightings from various people, and worst of all, they're all in key tourist areas. According to legend, Caesar's ashes were interred in a lead ball above an obelisk in Heliopolis, now present-day Cairo. In 1585, this obelisk was moved to Vatican City by Pope Sixtus V.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
The Pope opened the ball/globe to see if Caesar's ashes were inside and allegedly found nothing. The ball/globe from the top of the obelisk is now on display in the Museo dei Conservatori. I hope I got that right. Now, following on from this legend, apparently Caesar's ghost wanders the city, usually popping up around the Colosseum. Staying with the Colosseum, obviously thousands of slaves would fight to the death during the history of Rome, and it is said if you listen carefully, you can hear the screams of dying gladiators, tortured slaves, and the growls of caged animals. Ghostly figures walking up and down the stairs, and the occasional cold patch of airs. Looking at another famous Roman figure, after his suicide, legend has it that Nero took the form of a crow. Feasting with witches and wandering with demons near a walnut tree. And now I want walnuts. The Pope decided to take action against Nero's maleficent spirit, and in the 11th century built a church in the place of the walnut tree. This seemingly has worked. So far.
Candle on lawn 6.
And lastly, Valeria Messalina, the young wife of Emperor Claudius. Known mainly for her promiscuity, Messalina has woven her place into legend and the minds of every 12-year-old getting into Roman history. According to legend, she secretly worked in a brothel and even challenged a professional to see who could take the most lovers in an evening. She won with 25. And apparently walks the Coppian Hill near the Colosseum seeking another lover. It is reported she pinches the rear end of any young man she finds attractive. So you're telling me there's a Roman ghost near the Colosseum who runs around looking for young history nerds to sleep with? Hey Google, how much do flights to Rome cost?
Flights from London to Rome leaving the 20th of November...
Don't kink shame me!
As a Brit, however, I do know of another place that there's Roman ghosts. The M6! I mean, mostly York, but also the M6! Now, the M6 is meant to be one of the UK's most haunted roads. Roman soldiers, a distraught lady hitchhiker, and a phantom lorry going the wrong way have all been seen on the 6 busy lanes. Sue Coley from Colehill, that's amazing, in Warwickshire, told a survey being conducted on the spooky happenings on the M6 that she saw 20 soldiers more like upright shadows than men walking through tarmac as you would water. Moving up to York, the Roman 9th Legion would build a settlement and a fort known as Ibericum. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Surprisingly, Latin isn't my first language. The settlement would become a little place known as York. Perhaps you've heard of it. Not the new one, the better one. York is where my favourite tea comes from, and also the rivals for the Tudors. And yes, I know the mystery of the Ninth Legion, I will go into it one day, but it's not as spooky as you believe. Our first stop is a prime hotspot for ghostly Romans. Although Treasurer's House does host many phantoms, it's the Roman presence we're looking at today. Harry Martindale was an engineer who would later join the police. Whilst working at Treasurer's House, he heard the sound of a trumpet and the top of a soldier's helmet emerging from a wall he was working. Immediately leaping down from his ladder, he saw a horse from behind the trumpet player and about 20 soldiers walking abreast. Harry described the soldiers as having plumed helmets and wearing tiny tops over green tunics. Around their waist, the Romans had short red skirts, which had strips of leather hanging down. They had thongs. Not the thongs you're thinking of, get your mind out of the gutter. These thongs were tied from their ankles, that's that, up to just below their knees. This was interesting, as for many years it was believed the Romans tied these thongs just above the ankle. Get your mind out of the gutter. Yet in the 4th century it is now known that they tied them right up to their knees. Another factor dating these ghostly soldiers to the 4th century was their shields. The Romans are normally depicted with large rectangular shaped shields known as scutum. An archaeological discovery made at Hadrian's Wall changed this idea, however, and it showed that auxiliary troops during the 4th century used round shields similar in size and shape to those described by Harry. Yet, Harry's experience happened before this discovery. It's also worth noting that the 6th Legion, who replaced the 9th Legion in the area, carried round shields. Obviously, Harry had shat himself at the sight of Roman soldiers marching through a wall with their knees cut off, as the rest of the leg was only revealed as the Romans walked through a recently excavated region of flooring. Harry shot up the stairs, bumping into the curator, who calmly smiled before Harry could speak and said, "By the look of you, you've seen the Romans." Imagine working in a place so actively haunted that when an 18-year-old runs into you, scared out of their own mind, you just smile and go, "Oh yeah, I've seen them." 18 inches below the cellar floor, there is also evidence of a Roman road which they would have walked across. None of the Romans noticed Harry, or at least seemed not to. Staying in York and speaking of people who were dressed as Romans, in November 1972, Harry Gregg was passing the Memorial Gardens near Lehman's train station. He saw a scantily dressed man laying on a gravestone and bleeding severely from a stomach wound. Harry actually attempted to talk to the man, but when the man responded to Harry, he spoke in a strange language. Upon pulling a handkerchief in an attempt to stem the bleeding and turning around looking for help, the man vanished without a trace. Moving over to the Shambles, an old road in York, a haberdasher known as Arkwright was shifting boxes in his cellar. Suddenly he heard the sound of marching feet behind his cellar wall. Following this, he would see Roman soldiers marching through the wall, past him and through another wall, cut off at the knee as if walking via a road below the current cellar. This is said to have happened to at least 2 other shops within 100 yards of each other. Moving on, early in the morning in 1958, Mrs. Taylor and Mrs. Harding were walking along Davygate towards Church Street. As they walked towards it, they heard a ruckus coming from within Church Street. Specifically, they heard the clattering of metal, and looking towards Church Street, they noticed a group of men dressed as Romans fighting what seemed to be tramps wearing animal skins. There was allegedly 100 men in total. These men then disappeared when a delivery truck bibbed the ladies to move out of the road. In 1962, a man known as Ray Giles was crossing Lendal Bridge. Mr. Giles encountered 2 Roman soldiers, which he took for students playing a prank. He didn't pay them much attention as he walked past until a Yorkshire Terrier raced past him in an attempt to attack one of the figures. Upon clamping its jaws down into the shin of one of the Roman soldiers, the Yorkshire Terrier instead found itself flying forwards as it went through the apparition. Upon contact with the animal, the 2 Romans immediately disappeared into a grey mist. There have been a serious number of occurrences in the Roman baths below the Roman bath pub. Wonder why it's called that. Mostly these are just the sounding of footsteps or water being splashed as if someone is bathing themselves or having a little swim. Various visitors have gone down into the old baths only to flee moments later in hysterics, convinced that something had brushed against them. I'm not gonna lie, that's probably a smart move. Yes, come see the ghost. Oh, you're terrified? Have a drink. Genius marketing. More recently, the pub was under refurbishment, and obviously the refurbishments mainly took place during the night time. The painter and decorator who was painting the walls at the bottom of the staircase one night randomly refused to continue his work, claiming something was down there. A new painter would eventually have to be brought in, but they would refuse to work unless it was in broad daylight. There has been, as far as my research discovered, one actual ghost sighting in the pub. This was when two men, one of which was the manager of the Roman bath pub, decided to spend the night in the old Roman baths. This was for a good cause. It was to raise money for charity. This good deed did leave the two men completely alone in the dark on the cold stone floor of the old Roman bathhouse in one of the oldest and most haunted cities in the world. Oh, and a city specifically noted for Roman ghost sightings. As the night went on, the two men chatted merrily into the night until they noticed something. Both men would describe seeing the same thing. There was a sudden flash of bright light, and inside of which was a figure. The light and the figure faded into the area which the bottom of the bath's cold room can be seen. This literally sounds like the scene from The Fires of Pompeii when the doctor saves that family and then Peter Capaldi becomes a doctor 5 years later. The manager would actually see the light a few weeks later in one of the mirrors that used to be affixed to the wall. This second sighting allegedly caused him to immediately pack his bags and leave. To be honest, I don't blame him. Now, for some reason you're insane, and after hearing all this, you want to go and stay in York. The Dean Court Hotel, located in the shadow of York Minster, reportedly has an apparition of a Roman soldier walking around one of the rooms. 3 separate guests have reported seeing the ghostly figure in their bathroom mirror. No. Lastly, the Golden Fleece is an incredibly haunted pub. Roman soldiers have been seen marching through the cellar. What is it with Roman ghosts and cellars? There is another story about an amateur photographer known as Stuart Murray who apparently photographed a Roman soldier patrolling Hadrian's Wall, but I haven't found much else on it. And that's it. That's all the spooky stuff that we've got time for. The next video will be in between Remembrance Sunday and International Men's Day, so I have a special video planned, and I think this video is going to fly. Fighting fair. That's the code of the air. I'll see you in the next one.